Welcome back to the KiHealth podcast. Today we're going to be talking about metabolic health and the importance and power that the gut plays in overall health. To kick us off, Rob, tell us about some latest studies that were really eye-opening.
Yeah, I just read something recently that said 93% of all American adults are unhealthy, and which is wild because you're talking about less than 7% of adults that are healthy. A lot of times, if you do deep dive on this, they cherry pick some data points, but this one was relatively comprehensive. It talked about abdominal obesity, BMI, blood pressure, fasting glucose levels, insulin levels, triglycerides, HDL cholesterol. So it actually drew some really powerful data, but it's a scary statistic that kind of plays up this notion that people are unhealthy and health trends are going the wrong direction.
Well, you know what's so interesting about that is they're going in the wrong direction, but I think if you were to ask a lot of Americans, they wouldn't even know they're unhealthy. They're not likely getting regular testing done. They're not likely having true blood work and diagnostics performed. In fact, it was eye-opening to me that kind of pairing along with that statistic, 50% of Americans don't even have a primary care doctor. They're not seeing a doctor. And even if you do, the likelihood of your doctor sitting down and saying, let's talk about prevention. Let's understand what's going on in your body on a nutritional level. Those conversations just frankly aren't happening. And you can't blame people if they don't know why they're unhealthy or that they're even unhealthy to begin with. And I think that's really what we're trying to start a conversation about is, do you know your body on the inside? Just because you may look good on the outside or your skin may look good today doesn't mean that you're not nutritionally deficient and that your operating systems are performing appropriately.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. We'll kind of do a deep dive on the gut and on the metabolism. As you mentioned, you could appear to be skinnier and not have any, debilitating issues, not be on a ton of medications, but for all you know, there's a proliferation of bad gut bacteria, of fungi, of viruses that are kind of lying dormant. And then it isn't until an episode is triggered where you now have to take acute action. So getting that information to know exactly what's going on in your body, even if you appear or feel somewhat healthy, it's kind of that old notion of how do you know you're healthy? Like you could possibly be far more optimized and far more healthy. A lot of people don't realize they have brain fog until they modify their diet or their lifestyle and realize, oh my gosh, I feel so much more mentally acute. So we'll kind of get into the weeds a little bit on the gut microbiota and kind of some of these components that I think would be very useful to listeners to really sort of navigate their health journey.
Yeah, it's interesting you talk about the gut. I would say 5 years ago when people would say gut, I'd be like, well, my stomach doesn't hurt. I must have a healthy gut. Or I'm not feeling bloated. My microbiome must be healthy. And, it's been eye-opening to me over the last few years how connected all physiology is to the gut. So if I feel tired, if I feel agitated, if I have brain fatigue, I never would have immediately thought gut. I think a lot of people think my skin, I have eczema. Could that be linked to the gut? My reaction a few years ago would have been, why? I mean, how is your skin related to your gut? And I think one of the eye-opening experiences for me was actually going through my health journey with my daughter. Olivia was super healthy, toddler, nothing wrong with her. And then out of the blue, at around 18 months old, breaks out with eczema over her entire body. And I'm going to dermatologists, allergists, pediatricians. I must have seen 10 doctors. And they all wanted to treat the symptom. And it's not their fault. They weren't necessarily trained to look beyond what they saw, what appeared on the skin, which was the eczema. And I kept digging and digging and digging. And I finally saw an integrative pediatrician and she said, well, have you tested her gut? And I remember thinking, well, I'll try anything, but why the gut? This is eczema. It's on her skin. How are they linked? And we ended up testing her gut. And, much to my surprise, she had a parasite. And the parasite had damaged the lining of her gut. And basically anything she was eating, she was having an inflammatory reaction to, which was showcasing as eczema. And we treated her gut, and within a matter of weeks, the eczema completely cleared. And it changed the way that I looked at how we treat disease as a whole, because I had spent so much of my lifetime focused on treating the symptom and not digging and trying to treat the root cause.
Sure.
That's really been part of our mission and our story, which is understand root cause care. Understand what's going on in your body so we stop covering up the symptoms with temporary fixes and we actually attack the problem at its root.
Yeah. I think root cause care. I think going to the lowest level, that cellular level, and starting there and branching out because it's systems biology. We go to different doctors for different things, but everything interacts, and that's kind of what we'll talk about today, which is how the gut connects to the brain, how that gut-brain axis is influencing your hormones, your personality, and everything, even though you've got separate doctors for separate things. So that's such a unique story, candidly, too, because a lot of times these medical interventions can make the problem worse when you address the symptoms. You're taking creams and steroids and a lot of topical components that may quell the acute sort of issue, but at the same time, it's going to cause more systemic chronic issues down the road if you don't go to root cause care. And there's so many examples of how we kind of put band-aids on issues and take a proton pump inhibitor like a Prevacid or a Pepcid for acid reflux. Yet we're going to create autoimmune disease down the road if you continue this, as you shut down these proton pump inhibitors in all the cells in your body, and it decreases bone health and skeletal health. And so it's more than just attacking the root cause so that you have a remedy and you fix it, but you also don't want to make things worse. And a lot of times it doesn't require a ton of legwork, and it's not that much of a harder process. It's just changing the perspective, right? Instead of symptom management, let's go to root cause, let's investigate that. And 9 times out of 10, you fix the problem far quicker.
Well, how I talk about it is, anytime anything happens, I joke, your nose runs, your head hurts, something in your body is sore. Before immediately going, how do I cure that headache with a Tylenol? Or how do I deal with my runny nose with an allergy medication? Ask yourself, why? Why is my body signaling that something is going on? And have I dug enough into understanding the why behind it so that I can really prevent it from happening in the future? And, that speaks to the importance and the power of diagnostic tests.
Yeah.
They really showcase to you what you can't see. I can't see what's going on in my gut. I can't see how my overall metabolic health is. I wouldn't even know what to treat.
Yeah.
I remember sharing with a friend recently, I did some comprehensive blood work, and here I am, I'm a very healthy person. I'm very concerned about developing diabetes because I understand the linkage between diabetes and Alzheimer's. And so I consume very little sugar. And when I did my blood work, it actually showed that my body was not disposing of sugar. I would never have known that if I hadn't done the blood work. So it's really powerful in arming us with the tools to operate our bodies in a more effective fashion. And, that kind of brings me to, Rob, talk a little bit about what the gut does, how it functions in the body and in a way that us maybe uneducated on general health would understand.
Yeah, I'll definitely jump to the gut, but I think you made a unique point about understanding how your body metabolizes glucose because, again, having the information, but then also getting the remedy and the solution is that key kind of double side of the coin. So you find your body doesn't metabolize glucose, let's say the same rate that I do, you wouldn't have known this, and you're going to have a remedy of health issues. The sugar, that glucose stays in your blood and actually becomes toxic and harm vessels and your entire circulatory pathway. So what you do is you then go to your interventions and you start to consume, glucose disposal agents like a berberine or a bitter melon after a large meal that has carbohydrates. So you're getting rid of that excess glucose. It doesn't stay in your blood and become harmful. You go for a 15-minute walk. So you allow your skeletal tissue to actually burn off that excess glucose. And now you're remedying, you're getting out in front of a lot of these chronic issues. So a lot of times the solution is very simple. But
it's very simple, and in most cases, it's available in gummies.
Yeah.
Because if you're an anti-pill person like me, a lot of these vitamins and supplements, which are naturally derived, can come in the form of almost feeling like a treat. So it's something you can add into your lifestyle that doesn't hamper the day or doesn't feel like it's overwhelming. And I think that's what a lot of people deal with is they're like, I'm taking so many vitamins, which one should I take? Or I'm overwhelmed with the 20 things I need to take in the morning. And I tell people, I'm like, figure out what you need.
Yeah.
And start there. You may not need half of what you're taking. In fact, it may be pushing you in the wrong direction. So until you know what you need, then you supplement accordingly. And then you find the right supplement, the high quality brands that are really going to transform the outcome.
Yeah, so perfectly said. So high level, screening tools like a diagnostic that can give you so much useful information on what's currently going on in your body biologically and physiologically, and then having the access to these remedies. It's literally kind of a two-step system. But as far as the gut health goes, I think kind of peeling back the curtain on what it is, because I think the one thing that I know you and I both read a ton and we get great comments is that People are wildly overwhelmed by the gut. They're like, yeah, we've heard it's important. We hear these references, gut health, gut health, gut health, but I have no idea what's going on down there. I don't know what to do to fix it. What foods are good? Are probiotics good or bad? Which probiotics? Because there are thousands of strains of bacteria. I mean, there are trillions of different microbes living in your body. That's way more than your cells. You have more bacteria than cells in your body. So you kind of look at what the microbiome is, and it's all these little microorganisms that are fungi, viruses, bacteria that live in the lining of your intestinal tract and then your gut. You have good bacteria and bad bacteria. And when you have good bacteria, you're essentially metabolizing, synthesizing, and absorbing nutrients to perform all these metabolic functions, and you'll remain healthy. As you develop more bad bacteria from genetically modified foods and artificial chemicals and all these things that we'll kind of get into later, once the bad bacteria kind of outweighs the good, then you start to get these chronic issues, and you get gut permeability and leaky gut and gut dysbiosis, and that leads to other autoimmune issues and cardiovascular issues and diabetes, and the kind of list goes on. You get this cascade. So really protecting that gut microbiome, that environment, that ecosystem of these microbes is so hugely important. And again, how would you know unless you had a really spectacular assay that would show you all these metrics of what's going on in your gut, to say you have, this healthy bacteria, this unhealthy bacteria. Do you have a parasite? What's the organisms of fungi that you have? Are there viruses that are proliferating? And then we can go into some of these things that are kind of the big things that destroy the gut. A lot of those are antibiotics. Antibiotics kill the bad bacteria, but also the good bacteria. And SAIDs like Advil and ibuprofen, those things are very harmful for gut health. Stress is harmful for gut health. So we can kind of do a deep dive into things that mess up your gut, but also a deep dive into stuff that's good for your gut. What foods play a vital role in populating good, healthy bacteria, and then also foods to stay away from.
Yeah, it's so interesting. And I'd love your perspective on this. I was chatting recently with my vet, and we were talking about just health and gut health and parasites. And she's like, yeah, as a vet, we want to look for parasites in dogs at least every year. And it got me thinking. I'm like, okay, we look for parasites in our dogs at least once a year. Why, as humans in the US, do we not, consider that we could potentially have parasites? I mean, we eat raw fish, we eat vegetables that are unclean, we eat meat that may not be all the way cooked. There's so many we could be picking them up with the things we touch on a daily basis and then put near our mouths. I'm curious why you think we don't test annually for parasites, given the potential for us to have them.
Yeah, that's a great question, and it probably goes more to big pharma, big ag, and big food. And that's kind of, we're going to have some great podcasts on that because they play such a vital role in everything, right? If you look at big pharma and big food, they're the two biggest funders of government, two biggest funders of labs, two biggest funders of higher education. So all these studies that we get, all this research, it kind of really funnels to their bottom line. So that's why we have to be advocates. That's why this podcast exists. That's why our company exists. That's why people at home really need to educate themselves because, as you read these studies, you find out that 60% of people don't understand the gut or they don't think it's important. We need to stress that importance. And I think, the key components that you can kind of break down, what the gut does is these different pathways. I mean, if there's a neural pathway, there's a vagal nerve that connects the gut to the brain, this entire enteric nervous system. So people are like, wow, okay, yeah, I've got some, discomfort after I eat crappy food. No, it plays a far different role. It influences your hormones. The serotonin production is in your gut. There's more nerve endings in your gut than in your brain. So if you've got hormonal imbalances or you're going to premenopause, all these things can actually occur from gut health issues. Your immune pathway is connected to your gut completely. So, it can cause a cytokine storm and lead to illnesses. Your endocrine pathway. So you're talking about gut hormones play a vital role in your personality, your behavior, your energy, your mood, everything. So the gut really is far beyond, oh yeah, I eat crummy food, I'm a little bloated or whatever. It really plays a systemic role in your entire body's health. So I will pause on the why don't we test for these components, because I think that's a deeper dive into kind of the healthcare industry as a whole, as well as kind of what are the motivations behind it. Mm-hmm. But there are companies doing some really unique things like KiHealth that are going to offer this information to the population as a whole, and they're going to offer it at a very reasonable price where you can get this massive insight into your gut health. So you can, if you have hormonal dysregulation, if you're kind of on that path to chronic disease, you can end it and fix it.
Yeah, no, it's become like a personal passion of mine, and ours, I would say, and what we're doing. After I went through that with my daughter, and I started to learn more about the link between gut health and disease as a whole. I mean, in fact, there was a study recently published out of Australia where they were talking about the interconnectivity of a healthy gut and the increased risk profile for developing Alzheimer's. And the more that you learn about these things, the more important it becomes. But then the next thing that I always go to is, okay, great. You know that you need to test your gut. You know that you need to understand, what's going on with your microbiome, your leaky gut risk. Do you have a parasite? And then usually what I hear from people is, well, great, I know I need to do this, but how? Either I don't have a doctor, or I have a doctor and they don't know enough about gut health to even have a conversation with me. Because, again, not their fault. Or they don't even know what test to offer me. Yeah. So there's so many barriers to access. And that's really at the core of what we're trying to do, is remove those barriers so that anybody, anywhere, at any time can walk into a retail pharmacy down the street or go online and purchase a test that can tell them, is your gut really healthy? What's going on with your gut? Do I have a parasite? Is there something I need to be concerned about? And not only test once, because I do, talk about this all the time. One test is great. It's going to give you a foundation to start with. It's going to tell you where you need to focus. But if you're not testing your gut every 6 to 12 months, you're not going to know if something might have happened from the last time you tested. So I tested in January. Great. I don't have a parasite. But I could pick one up tomorrow. And so if you're not testing your gut annually at the very least, and testing your whole family to understand what's going on, you're never going to get a full picture of something that is absolutely foundational to your health.
Well, and also to track the success of the intervention. So as you mentioned, I want to take the initial test to find out where I'm at currently. But then as I start to make these lifestyle modifications, I'm going to start taking probiotics, eat more prebiotic fiber, exercise a little bit more, improve my strength training sessions, do some mindfulness training to reduce stress. And I kind of make all these modifications. I want to retest and see if it's working, if it's successful. If you can't track it, you can't change it. So that's why screening tools and diagnostics are so vital. They're so underrated because we're all just kind of, you've mentioned this before, we're just kind of just throwing stuff against the wall and hoping it works and walking around blindfolded. I'd rather know exactly what's going on in my body and if the things that I'm doing are leading to a successful outcome. I think a lot of the stuff that we do, there's no ROI, but we're still kind of burning our time, and time is so vital. I want to spend all of my time only doing things that are adding value. I think a lot of people do a lot of different things or consuming certain foods or put their bodies under stress, and there's no beneficial outcomes. So you mentioned kind of releasing or reducing the barriers and getting the access. I think also too, simplifying it. I think there's one thing that we can provide is giving you access to these diagnostics and this information, and then simplifying the protocols and solutions. There is this minutia of information on the internet, and I think it overwhelms people because they don't know what to trust. They don't know what's propaganda or just marketing. So if we can streamline that and give people the real sort of meat and potatoes on what's useful, what are the solutions are, because people have busy lives. And they want to know what's going to work and help them be healthy and kick out that health span and longevity. And that's the real core principles of KiHealth is living a healthy life, living a long, abundant life. And the access to that point is candidly simple. Great screening tools, great interventions that are based in science.
Well, it's so interesting you talk about ROI. I am 100% guilty, as are most of my girlfriends, of spending money on things you don't even know if you need. I used to joke that it was like the circular thing. It'd be a group text of, I saw this on Instagram. It says it's going to make you healthy. Or I saw this on Instagram. It said it was going to give you energy. And I was like, cool, what is it? And I would just add it into my regimen. And before you know it, I'm taking 15 different things every morning that are supposed to, make me ageless, make me feel good, make my skin glow. And I have no idea if I need them. I have no idea if they counteract. You just keep adding, because there was no way to know. And I think there's this assumption that if I just keep taking things, eventually I'll feel good.
Yeah.
And you're not necessarily taking what you need, nor are you potentially taking the right dose. I talk a lot about, I'm like, just because I need, this, milligrams of this doesn't mean you do. We're different people. We're biologically different. We need different things. And that's a lot of what we're trying to focus on is give you a good ROI on your time and the investment you make in your health. So if you only have X number of dollars to spend this month, spend them where they're going to have the biggest impact.
Yeah.
And that's what we all want to do. None of us want to waste money on, things, I joke, that we're peeing out that have absolutely no value. It's spend it on the supplements, the vitamins, the nutritional elements that our body needs to perform. And, to pivot a bit, I'd love to hear your perspective on how is metabolic health, and maybe you need to define metabolic health because, again, playing the silly one over here, I think a lot of people think metabolic health is my metabolism, and it's way more than that. But talk to me a bit about metabolic health and gut health and how they're interlinked, because I think I've gotten a lot of questions. Okay, why did you launch with a metabolic health test, diabetes detect, and a gut health test, to begin with? How does that matter, and why are those two elements so foundational to general health?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think understanding your metabolism and understanding your gut health are the two biggest, most foundational things that you can know. I mean, it's proven that the top 7 killers, whether it's cardiovascular disease, cancer, diabetes, the underpinnings of all those illnesses is metabolic dysregulation. So your metabolism, in simple terms, is you consume food, our body you break down the food. So your cells can essentially create ATP or energy. So anabolism, catabolism, we can basically just look at metabolism as consuming food, breaking down sugars into little components, carbohydrates, lipids, nucleic acids, so that your body can run a whole bunch of chemical processes. Millions of different chemical processes are involved in your metabolism. Obviously, the gut overlaps into that as it's consuming, it's breaking it down. There's release of gastric juices, there's absorption, and actually activation of these nutrients. So there's this massive overlap between your digestive system and your metabolics. Your metabolics, again, is this combination of all these chemical reactions, and they're going to dictate the flow of everything: liver function, kidney function, renal issues, endocrines, hormones. So if you really want to get to that principle that we've talked about, which is root cause care, kind of the core fabric of how your body functions, you got to know what your body's doing metabolically, and you have to know what's going on in that gut. And then you can have sort of the sexier biomarkers and some of these other things to kind of bolt onto it. They just give you more actionable insight. But if I'm starting, I need to know those two components, and they're so key. If I have, if I'm pre-hyperglycemia, if my glycation levels are through the roof, I'm on the road to diabetes, heart disease, and inevitably a high level of comorbidities. And that's why your metabolism is so vital to know, because it's going to attack every part of your body if it's not addressed. And then obviously the gut plays a major role in the digestion, in the absorption of these nutrients that we're consuming. And that's why we're going to talk a lot about food on this. Candidly, it's low-hanging fruit. I mean, there was a study out of Tufts that said 85% of all deaths were related to foodborne or metabolic issues. So that means if you understood metabolism and you understood what you're consuming, you could prevent 85% of annual deaths. And then you can kind of do a deeper dive into that, and people will say, well, Rob, what's changed over the last 5 decades? Gut health. Why is gut health sexy now and it wasn't 30, 40 years ago? It's because 40 years ago, we were consuming whole foods. Now the food that we're consuming is sprayed with glyphosate, herbicides, pesticides, all these insecticides, and then there's this infusion of genetically modified things. All these petrochemicals, thousands of chemicals that have no longitudinal data on how it's influenced in your body. So now these things are killing the good bacteria. We have little to no good healthy bacteria, and now our body's really struggling. So, understanding what you put in your body and the impact and the role it plays on your metabolics and on your gut health is key. And I'll make one example, which, a lot of people for years, good prebiotic and probiotic foods were dairy products. Whether they were fermented or natural dairy products, they were extremely good for you. You fast forward to modern day, we've kind of had this mass sort of feedlot process of creating dairy, and everything is homogenized, ultra pasteurized, aka it's boiled, it's bleached, it's run through this process where they denaturize everything that's in it. And then when you see the side of it says, oh, vitamin D added, calcium added. Well, they had to add it back in because they killed everything in it, because the process of actually making these products is so disgusting. There's so much bacteria that they then have to boil it and bleach it and pasteurize it. So we're not getting any probiotics. There's no bacteria in that food. They killed it all. But if you're consuming raw dairy, raw milk, or fermented cheeses, it's loaded with good, healthy gut bacteria. So it's really kind of going back to our roots. But that's the question that I always get. They're like, Rob, what changed? Like, what's different? I'm eating the same foods that we ate, 25 years ago. It's like, well, actually, we're not. We're eating far different foods. So we'll get into the good foods that feed your gut, the foods to stay away from, good prebiotic and probiotic options, digestive enzymes, how they kind of play a role in these systems. Because I think that we can deliver just some very small, useful, actionable things that can wildly transform people's health. I've had buddies that have had 20 years worth of acid reflux or GI issues or bloating issues, IBS, and a lot of times it's one or two things. Take this, pre-digestive fiber, some soluble fibers before you eat, and get rid of these two components that are causing massive inflammation. So we'll get into that later, but the power of understanding your metabolism, understanding your gut are the core foundations, the real sort of bedrock of building your health. That's where I would begin. Most researchers, as you mentioned, your metabolism plays a role in neurodegenerative disease, respiratory health, cardiovascular health. It's even, you see metabolic dysregulation in cancer as well. So I'd want to know what's going on in my body metabolically. I want to know what's going on in my gut. And there's actionable things to really address both of those.
Wonderful. And, one key thing, I think that people are going to question when they see our metabolism or your metabolic health test is, well, historically, we just tested your HbA1c or your insulin levels. And, what is this whole beta cell death rate? Why do I need to know about beta cells? I laugh even, a few years ago before we started on this journey, if somebody would have walked up to me and said, what's your beta cell rate? I'd be like, I don't know. What's a beta cell? Yeah. So I think there's a lot of questions in, why does this number matter? Where do beta cells come from? How do we produce them? And, why is it something I should even care about?
Yeah. It's a great point. And candidly, the short answer is the earliest glimpse. So you're going kind of the very beginning. So as we consume carbohydrates, we take those carbohydrates, we turn it into glucose essentially. That glucose will bind to insulin and then it gets entered into the cell. The cell creates ATP. That's a very sort of watered down version of how we make energy. But for quickness sake, so what happens is we consume too much sugar. Our diets are way too sugar laden, so we're blunting that insulin response to the point where our body struggles manufacturing insulin. That makes us pre-diabetic and eventually diabetic. And this is all happening in the pancreas. So what your beta cells are in your pancreas, in the islet cells, are these beta cells. And these beta cells play a major role in producing insulin. That insulin is a necessary component for the glucose to enter the cell so the cell can create ATP and energy. As you lose that insulin, that sugar can't go into the cell. That cell's not going to create energy. Now that sugar is just going to circulate in your bloodstream and cause massive problems. So what's unique about this is the beta cells give you the earliest glimpse that there's metabolic dysregulation. So way before you're hyperglycemic, way before you're showing symptoms, or as you mentioned, these glucose numbers will spike because your beta cells are going to tell you when they're struggling to produce that insulin. So instead of having, a sort of, hey, this is what your blood levels are now, Rob, you can find out 6 months, 12 months, 24 months. Hey, we're starting to see your beta cells either have dysregulation, dysfunction, or they're dying. And this is a premature death for your age. So there's something going on. And a lot of times you could limit the amount of sugar intake to preserve beta cell death. A lot of times it's a very simple intervention. So beta cell understanding, knowing the function and knowing the death rate is a massively powerful tool because it'll give you the earliest glimpse at your metabolic health way before you're even symptomatic for diabetes, which makes you before you're symptomatic for neurodegenerative disease, symptomatic for cardiovascular disease. So that's why it's such a cool biomarker and such a powerful sort of component to the diabetes detect test. That candidly everybody should be taking. And before I kick it back to you, it makes me think, because I had another friend say, hey, well, should I get this test? Is there certain age groups that should get it? Is it just if you're older? And I said, okay, everybody should take it, candidly. And I sent him a study that showed that 50% of all teens were overweight. Teenagers. So a lot of people think, well, you get older, you get sedentary, you get a little slower, put on a little weight, you get comfortable, you make a little bit of money, and you develop some poor health outcomes. But when we have teenagers, 13, 14, 15-year-olds, and 50% of them are overweight, 25% are obese, there's a massive issue. So candidly, of any age, you should know your metabolic health. I think before, when you and I were running around, we were kids, we didn't see a lot of that. The food system has changed, the environment's changed, the game has changed entirely. So candidly, I think everybody should get a test like this to know their metabolic health.
Yeah, when I talk about it, this is the first time that anybody could access a test that would give them the earliest glimpse at their beta cell death rate. And I think that's really important. I'm a simple person when it comes to understanding. I'm very visual. So the way that I explain it is when you're a child, when you're an adolescent, you make more beta cells than that die. So you have an overproduction of them. When you get into your middle age, you could think about it. That's where I'm sitting right now. You are actually making as many as you are losing. So it's net neutral for the most part. It's a simple way of looking at it. And then as you get into that older demographic, you're losing more than you're making. What our test is going to tell you is, are you abnormal? If you're my age and I'm losing disproportionately more than I'm making, I am in metabolic dysregulation. It's the earliest signal that I can get that I am more than likely going to get diabetes. And I'm going to know before I'm symptomatic so that I can actually change something before the damage is so far gone that it's having lasting implications on my health. Yeah. And that's what we're seeking to do, is give people the earliest signal possible to transform how they live so they can live a longer, healthier life.
Yeah, that's such a great point. And I had somebody even ask me, okay, what's the power behind sort of screening tools and diagnostics? And the equivalence is like taking your car into a shop to get it fixed, and some guy just kind of glancing at it and say, yeah, let's fix the transmission without ever looking at it. You have no idea what's wrong with it. So the first thing they do is diagnostics. They get in there and they look around, they find out what the problem is. Mm-hmm. That's what our assays do. That's what these biomarkers do. They're so powerful. But at the same time, if you're driving around with a check engine oil light on and you just ignore it and ignore it, it could have just been a $65 oil change. You keep ignoring it, trashes your engine, it trashes the whole vehicle, and it's beyond repair. It's the same thing in your body. If you ignore these biomarkers and you have beta cell death in excess and you don't know it and it's all happening underneath the surface, you get to a point where you have full-blown diabetes and now you need to manage this disease instead of being able to prevent it. Mm-hmm. So a lot of times you make a small investment in your health and you can eradicate very costly and very miserable outcomes. And it's accessible, it's affordable, and a lot of these interventions are classically very available and affordable. So I think that's such just a superb example of sort of the necessity of stuff like this.
Yeah, sticking to the car analogy, I always find this one to be kind of interesting. So often we with what we do, we paint the outside of a car without taking into account the integrity of the car itself. So we're spending money doing things that may be for a loss or may not make any sense. We're treating symptoms to cover up the root cause because we don't take the time to figure out the root cause. Yeah. And I am so excited to be able to be a part of offering people the opportunity to know what's going on in their body and to put consumers back in the driver's seat, to feel empowered that we get to choose what we want to know about our body, that we get to choose how we use that information. Feeling empowered to take action is a beautiful thing. It gives hope. That's what gets me out of bed every morning, is giving people the opportunity to have that hope and to not feel like everything in their life and their health is being dictated to them versus them being able to be in the driver's seat.
Yeah, I'd actually like to hear you kind of expand on a component. We talk about preventing disease. We talk about getting early detection biomarkers so that you can intervene, prevent disease, have a healthier life. We talk about how when you take advantage of this, you can improve how you feel and your energy levels and your optimism and your mood and all these components. But I've seen you really take massive strides and initiatives over your health these last several years, seen you change physically, your fitness levels, mental health, all these components. But can you talk specifically about, I think, the more personal parts of this, right? So when you change your diet, your lifestyle, your health, you're more present, you have more energy for your kids and your family, you're more optimistic, those things I think are a little less discussed. It's easy to say, oh, hey, if you eat this way and you go to the gym, you're going to look this way. It's beyond aesthetics, and it's even beyond staving off chronic disease, because you're getting time back. But what's that time for, and how valuable is that time? Because you're healthy, you're aware, you're present, you're not having some debilitating issue. So it's time with your family, it's your outlook on life, it's how present and connected you are with your loved ones. So you obviously having 3 girls, and really taking your health journey serious and watching you kind of transform. Can you talk about why that part of it is so powerful and so important?
Oh my gosh, that's such a big question, and it's so multifaceted. I joke I have 3 Energizer bunnies. They wake up and they are at 100% until they go to bed. Which and I'm an older mom. I'm in my 40s and I have a 4-year-old. I think about that because not only do I think about having energy for them right now, because it means I need to show up first thing in the morning, I need to give 100% at work, and then I need to show up to put them to bed, to feed them, to read them stories, and to do so with a smile on my face, not feeling depleted or tired or frustrated. But just as important, I want to show up like that when they graduate college, when they have their kids. So when I'm 85 or 90 years old, I want to show up with that level of fortitude and energy and zest for life. And, having gone through an experience where I watched, my mother decline starting at the age of 45. She won't be there for her grandchildren. She won't be able to have the memories that I don't take for granted that I want to have with my kids. And so it changes your perception, your outlook on life, because everything I do will impact the outcome of what I hope to have. The food I put into my body, the supplements I take, the analysis. I mean, I joke with people, I'm like, I do my blood work every 6 months, sometimes even more frequently. People are like, can I prick you and give you a data point? I'm like, 100%. How much blood do you need?
Yeah, I do comprehensive labs once a quarter. I do it every 3 months.
Yeah, and the reason being is because I am hacking my body. And I'm hacking my body not so that I look amazing, although don't get me wrong, I like to look pretty in the morning. It's so that I feel amazing. It's so that I have my aptitude and my brain functions at a high level when I'm in my 80s and 90s. I am not going to lose out on time because I don't invest time today. Yeah. And that's what I talk to people about all the time. I'm like, you deserve to feel good. You deserve to wake up in the morning and be excited about what the day has in store for you. The only thing that is stopping you from that is taking control back, is to understanding what's in your body and deciding what you want to do with that information, And all of us are different. I mean, you and I joke about this all the time. You could live on meat. I don't eat meat. And that works for each of us individually. Yeah. And, I supplement, for the meat I'm not getting with more iron-rich vegetables, and I take an iron supplement, and that works for our body. But I really encourage people, and we are not the end all be all. There are so many facets and resources, but wake up and get in the driver's seat. Learn about your body, optimize your body. If you're not feeling good, don't give up until you do. Because there is absolutely no reason that we shouldn't feel good and feel energized without caffeine. Although caffeine is great, it shouldn't be required. We should have adequate energy, and if you don't, there's a dysregulation or something wrong.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And, I've been on this journey for 20 years of just optimizing. Every time you think you're optimized, you're like, wow, I'm pretty fit, I'm pretty healthy, I got good energy, I've got mental clarity. And then you keep going, you're like, didn't know there was another level to it. So I think people don't know what they don't know. So if you really take the reins, take ownership, you'll be wildly pleasantly surprised that there was another level that you weren't aware of. Mm-hmm. That bloating or those GI issues or the lethargy or the knee pain or brain fog didn't, there was a reason for it. You didn't need to have that. You mentioned caffeine, and caffeine is a great example. I love caffeine. It's an adenosine receptor site blocker. It doesn't even give you energy. It actually just blocks your brain saying you're tired. So a lot of the information that we'll provide will be actually, the stuff that gives your body real energy. And you brought up obviously your mom's health journey, with the neurodegenerative disease, and we both know how preventable that was, right? So we've talked about the gut. How does the gut interact with the brain? Well, things like C. difficile or SIBO, which is small bacterial intestinal overgrowth, that passes the blood-brain barrier. So if you have this bacterial overgrowth and that cerebral spinal fluid is flushing through that process and it passes the brain and the brain feels like it's under attack, it's going to deploy that tau protein. It's going to deploy what its defense mechanism. You go in and you do CTs and scans, and neurologist says, oh yeah, the protein's present, you have dementia or Alzheimer's. Well, that wasn't the root cause. It's finding that root cause. So when you're really peeling back the layers on your metabolic health and your gut health, you're going to get such massive insights to what could lead to things down the road. We'll even get into the diet stuff too, because that stuff, it's so vital. If you look at the biggest culprits in terms of messing up your gut, it's oxalates, it's sulfur, it's histamine. So if you start to look at the stuff that you consume, remove the things that are high in oxalic acid, remove the things that are going to cause a histamine response, remove the things that are high in sulfur. These are going to trigger a lot of adverse GI issues. We talked about the marketing component of a lot of this. The biggest purchaser of kale for 20 years was Pizza Hut, because of the decoration around the salad bar. It was never consumed. It was a garnish, and all of a sudden it gets rebranded as a superfood because somebody puts it under a microscope and sees high levels of vitamins. But when it interacts with your body, it's wildly detrimental. And the level of oxalates creates a literal cytokine storm, and it's very detrimental to your health. So a lot of people hop online and they, as you mentioned, read all this information. So I'm going to throw some blueberries and some spinach and drink my smoothie and throw a little oats in there that are high inflammation grains, and then they feel like trash. But they're like, I'm doing something good, so something must be happening that's good. So I would like to, as you mentioned, there's so many great resources that we're going to bring on. People that are experts even more than us. But we've been able to cut through what is legitimate, what is not, stuff that is actually scientifically founded, referencing, peer-reviewed PubMed articles that is the real information, not the opportunists on Instagram that just kind of want to peddle their brand, but stuff that's actually founded in science, and how stuff interacts with your body. Because again, there's very low-hanging fruit, actionable things that you can do, improve your gut health, improve your metabolic health, stave off disease, be more present with your family, mental clarity, high energy, that is your body creating its own natural energy, not exogenous sources like stimulants. And I'm excited to be able to kind of roll out these episodes that are very specific and kind of nail down on the stuff that will optimize people's health.
Yeah, and we could probably talk for an entire day. So we probably are coming towards the end of this, session or episode. The one thing I would leave people with is ask questions. Look at your body. Ask why. If we just asked why more often, I think it would drive a conversation or an outcome that would be positive for everyone. Thank you for tuning in today. If you like what you heard, drop us a note in the chat. Ask a question. Follow us. We'd love to keep in touch with you. And if you're trying to find out where you can, check out the description below.
Yeah, check out the website too, guys, KiHealth.com.